And what's going on, Los Angeles, Bruin Nation, LAFB fam? How we doing? The Thriller and Madman back together again for all of your UCLA football needs. Thriller, it's so great to see you, my brother. Been a few days. Obviously, we've talked a bunch offline, but great to see you again kind of in this forum. First off, just how we doing the last couple of days? How's life?
Man, outside of the bone-crushing loss on Saturday, things are looking up in life. Maybe not for UCLA football, but in life in general, I think things, when you get out of just the element of what's going on the football field, you can kind of appreciate I've got good health. I've got people that, care about this podcast. I've got you to hang out with. So outside of the, arguably the worst start in the history of UCLA football, things are going all right.
Things are going all right. Kind of the state of the season right now, Thriller, when we start with health. At least we have our health.
Yeah. Man.
Absolutely. But before we sort of jump into previewing New Mexico, it's been a short week. We'll get into kind of some key players, matchups, and sort of what to expect. Didn't get a chance to sort of get your take in this forum, on the UNLV game. We don't have to spend a ton of time on it, but just, maybe your 60-second impressions and just where you are as we move forward.
Yeah, incredibly embarrassed for the program, for the fans that continue to spend their hard-earned money. There's people on Twitter hitting me up saying, hey, are you going to the game in Vegas? They took their families on vacation for that. And it was just a very tough Saturday evening. I mean, what you want to see and what we talked about with Wayne, on the previous episode, the preview of the UNLV game was you just want to see tangible improvement. You want to see that they were hurt from the previous game and, that they would show up, early and ready to play a game where, this isn't a Power 2 school. This isn't a Power 5 school. Like, this team's in the Mountain West right now. So we had to show up and, make plays. And when you go down 23-0 after getting, humiliated previously at home in the opener against Utah, it's just a failure from the top down. And, we were, the yardage at the first half, 235 to 110 in favor of UNLV in that first half. And yeah, we made some comebacks. And, I do think Nico is very talented. The 30-yard touchdown run, he made some great drives and throws. He got Quasi involved on offense. It wasn't enough. And, I mean, if this was, Michigan State or somebody that we kind of thought of as like a really high-quality opponent, at least with the Utah game, we defended like this team could win the Big 12.
Right.
What happens with that. We could have some, semblance of, feeling we did something credible in this situation. But this was far from the opposite of what happened there. And, I'm just hurt, man. I know a lot of people are, on Twitter right now kind of airing their grievances. I thought last week was as low as I've seen the fan base in a long time. This week kind of doubled the odds of that. So it's a tough circumstances, for everyone all around. And, I just hope we can get together and make the right decisions because this is, like I told you before the show, I think this is a must-win game for DeShaun Foster, moving forward. Like, this could get really, really ugly if we do not bridge the gap here very quickly. And New Mexico is one of those games where, given how the season started, I think it's a must-win for the future of Foster and this talented recruiting class that he's built, right? I'm worried about what happens to that if we aren't able to, start stacking some wins here soon in a situation that seems pretty untenable right now.
Yeah, no, well said, Thriller, and really nice bridge and segue into previewing New Mexico. Obviously, still the emotions are raw, but we got to kind of turn the page quickly for better or for worse, given that it's a short week. And here comes New Mexico to town, a team that's 1-1. It's very interesting, Thriller, in this game for a couple of reasons, and you sort of alluded to it. The first is UCLA is a heavy favorite in this game. The line is between 14.5 and 15.5 points right now. So really, really high expectations from Las Vegas for UCLA. If folks recall, the line in the UNLV game by the time it got to kickoff was UCLA by 1.5. So it was almost a pick'em game with UNLV. Obviously, we thought they would exceed expectations, and the reverse happened. The other interesting piece here, Thriller, is given the start to the season, obviously UCLA sits at 0-2. If you look at the ESPN FPI, the Football Power Index of ESPN, they put together a win probability from a percentage standpoint for all teams and all of their games. As it stands right now, the game against New Mexico is the only game on UCLA's schedule where they are favored from an FPI perspective, where they have a greater than 50% chance of winning the game. So to your point, it's very, very significant to be able to get this game, because I still believe this is a very attainable game. Northwestern is a very attainable game. Home for Maryland is a very attainable game. And then, maybe things strike, you get one more. But, we're sitting in that 3-4 win total at this particular point. But I think what's interesting about New Mexico, Thrill, and really want to get your thoughts, they come in 1-1. They opened in the Big House against Michigan. And then they followed it up against Idaho State. Now, what's interesting about the Michigan game, Thriller, is that was a 34-17 final, heralded true freshman Bryce Underwood's first start. So obviously there's some nerves there. There's some jitters. There's some cobwebs that you have to work out. But Michigan didn't exactly blow New Mexico away. That was a very respectable 34-17 final. And in fact, if you look at quarters 2 and 3 of that game, New Mexico actually outscored Michigan over second quarter and third quarter of that game. Michigan got, 14 early. They got 7 late. But the middle point of that game, New Mexico actually outscored Michigan. And furthermore, when you look at the capacity of the crowd that they played in the Big House, kind of walking into the Big House, seeing Michigan, the bright lights, the maize and blue, all of the pageantry, all of the crowd.
115,000, right?
A team that's going to be intimidated to come into the Rose Bowl Friday night, particularly. And we hope this is not the case. We hope, as we've encouraged all the fans to continue to show out, but we're not expecting a huge number at the Rose Bowl Friday night. We could be threatening numbers like we saw, that opener against Bowling Green a couple of years ago. It may go south of that. It may go a lot south of that in terms of attendance, just when you're sort of getting a sense of fan sentiment. So New Mexico is going to come in, I think, with some battle scars, but they played a really marquee opponent, played them well, and they're coming into an environment where I don't think they're going to be intimidated. Now, they followed up that New Mexico game with a tough game against Idaho State. And when I mean tough, I mean their performance was very shaky. They were down in that game in the fourth quarter. They came back and won. But, then again, UNLV was down to Idaho State, in their opener and came back and won. So kind of an interesting breakdown there. A couple of playmakers, for New Mexico, Thriller. You've got Scott Trey Humphrey, their leading rusher. He's at 175 yards rushing on the season, 6.2 yards per carry, 5'9", 200, interesting scat back there. He's sort of their primary rusher. And then their leading receiver is Dorian Thomas, their tight end, with 15 receptions for 170-plus yards and 2 touchdowns. They've had some shaky play at quarterback to start this season, but they're going to want to run the ball. They're going to want to throw the ball safely, get it sort of out of harm's way, particularly with the 3 interceptions against Michigan. So a very interesting game here. Again, there's a significant talent discrepancy, but where is the psyche of this UCLA team at 0-2? And where is the psyche of this New Mexico team at 1-1, having played a real marquee opponent? So your thoughts, Will, on this New Mexico game?
Yeah, I think it's big. And you mentioned a really good point. They were battle tested in week 1, and they held their own. It was 17-10 in the second quarter of that game, and it felt within striking distance. Michigan eventually came away and won that game. I think it was like 38-17, 35-17, something of that nature. But, they held their own. They had one of the coolest trick plays you'll ever see in a game. Was a fake field goal attempt on a 2-point conversion they put in for 2. Jack Lane was, Coach Jason Eck, who is the head coach at New Mexico. He was his quarterback at Idaho, so he transferred with him to New Mexico. He had a touchdown and 3 interceptions that game, kind of weathered the storm last week. But you mentioned it, Scott Trey Humphrey. He's a Montana State transfer at the running back position. 6.2 yards a carry, 174 yards and 2 touchdowns. He had close to 1,400 yards and 16 touchdowns at Montana State the previous year. The guy's explosive. He's making plays for New Mexico right now. So that's something, especially with how bad UCLA's run defense has been up to this point. Jason Eck, we know this guy. I mean, if you watched last year at Idaho, they were down 17-14 to what was the number one team in the country for the majority of last year in Oregon. Like this guy is not scared of the moment. He plays in big time situations. He's a lifelong coach. And if you look at how many times he's had to uproot his family and move, it's really cool that the number one leading tackler on this team is actually his son.
Yeah.
In the backfield. Jackson Eck. Yeah. So who's kind of just followed him around. He was a coach at South Dakota. That's where Jackson went to high school at. So it's pretty cool to kind of see him follow his dad there. He started out as a GA at Wisconsin and has kind of worked his way from some smaller programs, your Minnesota States and your South Dakota States. And it's a good coaching story. And you can see his players really play hard for him. They're very similar to UCLA, where this is Eck's first year at New Mexico after kind of rebuilding Idaho into a 10-win team before he left. Over 20-plus transfers coming in to New Mexico, so a lot of new faces out there, a lot of new, players that can make plays. And the guy that I've got my eye on, he popped in the Michigan game, Dorian Thomas. You mentioned him. He's a transfer from University of Arizona that has followed out the tight end position. And he popped as an athlete in that game, even against Michigan defenders who the recent success of Michigan suggests 6, 7, 8 of those players in the defense are going to have a shot in the NFL when it comes time to how they've been recruiting. They won the national championship 2 years ago, things of this nature. So Dorian Thomas is a guy that I think UCLA's got to really target in on. But despite all those things I mentioned, this is the most winnable game for UCLA because, frankly, they have not found a way to really move the football or stop the football at a whole. 103rd in total offense and 108th in total defense. Right. And that's 134 Division I teams. So if UCLA is going to get it done, man, this is the week to do it. I'm interested, man. I'm going to throw it back to you with a question.
Please.
Who do you need to see a step up on offense for us to kind of get this humming? Because we found some semblance of a rhythm. I was embarrassed at the game, on Saturday like everybody else. But that second half, at least the offense was humming. Who are you excited to see come Friday night for UCLA under the lights?
Yeah, Thriller, I think it's a great point. There's sort of two elements that I think I'm really looking for. The first is, can you take some of the good, and I sort of mentioned this over the weekend on the show, from that second half kind of schematically, and there's a couple of things. I really want to see Quasi continue to build on his production really in the latter half of that game, in particular to the outside. I think they found something on those last couple of drives of getting the ball to him on the outside. I'm not in love, Thriller, with these intermediate across the middle plays, with Gilmer and with Matthews, because, they're just going to be taking a pounding. And you saw it this week at practice. Gilmer was held out of practice earlier in the week. He was on the bike, just kind of recovering because it was a pounding that he took. So that's not sustainable. So to me, getting Gilmer more on the outside and really getting that production going and, complemented by Matthews with the underneath stuff and the bubble screens, I think I'm really looking for that to be exploited. And then, Will, as much as I love having kind of a three-headed monster at running back and this sort of running back by committee approach, I really want to see a lead back emerge. I think that having a lead running back emerge is going to open things up for this offense, because particularly if you get Nico kind of on the zone read and have him sort of run to the outside, there's an opportunity to really exploit in between the tackles with the right running back. And I want to see whether Javion Thomas or Woods, I'm kind of looking at those two as two guys that I think just stylistically work a little bit better than Berger right now. To me, I think Berger is a nice change of pace back as your RB3, but I want to see either Javion Thomas or Woods really emerge as the lead running back, and one of those guys separate from each other. So those are the two, lead running back and Gilmer on the outside to really exploit, because you're spot on, Thriller. They're battle-tested. They're not going to be intimidated. But at the same time, this is a team that is lacking talent and productivity. You talked about it, 100-plus on offense, 100-plus on defense. UCLA's got advantages all over the field. They really need to be able to exploit that.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned the guy that I've kind of circled. It's Javion Thomas. He had the 32-yard run against UNLV last week.
Right off the bat, too.
Yeah, it was a beautiful thing to watch. But the problem is we've been down so early in these football games. We don't have our normal sense of offense where we can just run the ball effectively. We've been down like with a snap of the fingers so quickly that we have to pivot, right to a pass first offense, if you will. So I would love to see Javion on if we get the ball first, love to see a drive where Javion gets, 5, 6, 7 carries and, helps us connect that to at least a field goal on the opening drive. Our guy, woke up in a new Bugatti Pagani. I need to see some kicks from our guy, man. He's the only guy that has a chance of making all Big Ten this year, I think, in my opinion. But Javion Thomas, if he can get going, because we saw it at Cal last year, man, 6.3 yards a carry.
No question.
This guy outrushed Jaden Ott, who's at Oklahoma right now. Come on, man. Let's see it with the Jet. I'm ready to see it. Give him the football, and let's let some magic happen out on the football field with Jet Thomas, man.
Let's do it. Some magic happen indeed, Thriller. It's time for the Jet to take off, as they say. You and I have talked about how important he is going to be to the success of this season. This is that moment, because then I think with Woods, you can sort of use him in such a different variety of ways. You can get him some touches, in the backfield. You can throw to him on various wheel routes. You can get him on, sort of bubble screens. You can get him in the screen game. You can get him, on jet sweeps. I think Woods is sort of your Swiss Army knife running back, but Thomas has to become your lead back, and he needs to sort of separate in that way to be able to do it. I think that's absolutely spot on, Thriller. And it's an absolute must win, to your point. I don't even want to go there if this thing goes south, because
I'll go further. I don't want to come back on this show if we don't win. I do not want to come back and report.
Oh, man. I don't want to go there, because I will tell you, Thriller, growing up, loving UCLA, in the 90s growing up, and then obviously through the 2000s. In the 2000s, in my opinion, the low point of UCLA football was 2011 when that 50-0 loss to SC took place. A week later, UCLA had to play in the Pac-12 championship game because SC was on sanctions. Neuheisel was in tears before that game, wanting to be the coach, but knew he wasn't going to be retained. There was just such a feeling of emptiness in the program at that point. But it didn't last long, because then Mora got hired a few weeks later, and there was sort of a renewed enthusiasm there. I don't even want to go there, Thriller. If this thing goes south Friday in a very sort of low crowd, I hope that's not the case with the crowd, but I'm just sort of expecting this to be a little bit of a lesser of a crowd, particularly given the product on the field. If this thing goes south on Friday, we're talking about a new low point for UCLA football in the 2000s for sure. And so I think we're going to get it right. I like Nico to sort of, you made an I think UCLA's got to get the ball. If they win the toss, they got to get the ball, and they got to start playing with a lead. I mean, it's unbelievable, Thriller. In 2 games, UCLA has never led. I mean, think about that. UCLA has not had a lead yet this season. So just that opportunity to get off and take a lead and be able to play more on our terms, I think is going to be significant. Nico's going to be Nico. I think getting Gilmer and Thomas going, I think is going to be key. And then I think, Thriller, on the defensive side of the ball, I think the emergence of Jones and Keyshawn Bennett, we may have found something on the edge there, particularly with Keyshawn Bennett.
Yeah.
Yes. And so Jones and Bennett defensively, hopefully can sort of anchor. Gilmer and Thomas offensively can hopefully provide some semblance of stability. I think being at home is going to relax them a little bit after the trip. I think Nico's going to be Nico. I really like the Bruins to come through here, Thriller. 34-20. Bruins beat New Mexico. We get to 1-2 and have some momentum going into Northwestern. Your thoughts, score, prediction, and who you like?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go with 31-14. Similar ballpark right there. Like you said, man, get that ball first and just drive down the field. Give the fans what we've been pining for this whole time. Give us the lead. That's what we're looking for. And once you get that lead, it may be the momentum you need to take you over the top. I'm hoping big things from Quasi. I know he was held out of practice this week, but we will need him to win this football game. Javion Thomas, as I mentioned earlier. I'm just looking to see Nico just feel more comfortable out there, even on his big plays, like the 30-yard touchdown. He's running for his life on all those plays, right? So if he can just get a little bit more pocket time, maybe this offensive line gels a little bit more, and just cleaning up the missed tackles on defense, the lapses in coverage in the secondary. I still believe there's some good coaching on this team.
Yes.
When we saw what Malloy did down the stretch last year, we were as high as just about everybody was, with Tino Sinceri coming in. Coach Meat coming back. I mean, talk to the fan base before the season started. We were all excited about Coach Meat. So there's still some good coaching on this roster, but we just need to see it, very, very soon.
Need to see it on the field, Thriller. You said it best.
And it's just one of those things. Yeah, go for it.
No, and I think the other element that I'd love to see here is, that Cortland Ford injury, from last week, and how the offensive line is going to be reshuffled here. We started with Ford at left tackle, DeGiorgio at right tackle. With the Ford injury, DeGiorgio moves to left tackle. Unije comes in at right tackle. So I'm looking at the tackle spots and looking for stability there. Hopefully, we get a healthy Cortland Ford back, because I think Ford and DeGiorgio still, to me, feel like our best options. Unije put some decent plays together in that last game, but I think those are our best options for stability in the offensive line.
I agree. Yeah. I mean, Garrett DeGiorgio is a seasoned veteran, and he's played against some of the toughest, defensive lines the country has to offer. So I feel confident in him out there, but with Ford's injury, it's a little tough with Unije, who struggled mightily last year. He did, perform a little bit better and was kind of a little spark plug, if you will, for that second half bounce back for UCLA last week. So if it is Unije, we're hoping the world for our guy Ruben, but it's going to take a team effort out there, man. And we got to see something spark on this offense, specifically defense. Can they get some stops? It's the third downs. It's the early plays. We got to make sure we're locked in early. The defense looked decent in the second half last week. Can we keep that momentum moving into week 3? Those are my big questions for UCLA. If they can do that, we got a chance to get in the first win of the season.
Absolutely. And I think that's such a great point too, Thriller. Our ability to get New Mexico sort of off schedule, keep them in second and long, keep them in third and long, because again, their top 2 receivers on the season right now, are a tight end and a running back. They have not had a wideout really emerge yet. So if you can get them in those obvious passing situations, particularly with a quarterback in lane that's thrown 3 interceptions already, that's really that recipe. And if you can sort of get in those passing lanes on second and long, third and long, perhaps get some interceptions, a Key Lawrence, some guys, Stafford, are they going to be able to jump some lanes, Pleasant, and get some short fields? Nothing helps an offense and nothing helps momentum like short fields and being able to get points on the board off a turnover. So great points as always, Thriller. Before we leave, fans, before we sign off, you've noticed we've got a brand new flagship sponsor in Sleeper. And so if you've ever heard of the Sleeper app, here's a little secret. It's more than just a platform for season-long fantasy leagues. This year, millions of users enjoyed playing fantasy sports leagues on Sleeper, but the app offers so much more. Live stats, real-time updates, and visualization on all stats. It's a news feed, getting lightning-fast updates on your favorite players and teams, as well as a real-time chat. Engage with other users about individual plays and performances during the NFL and NBA seasons. Download the #1 sports app today and experience it for yourself. Well, folks, you heard it from Thriller. You heard it from the Madman. The spark indeed is going to come on Friday. We both got the Bruins winning on Friday, getting off of the mat at 1-2 and starting to restabilize this season. Tune in, get to the game, support this team. These kids deserve it. Even if we don't feel like the direction of the program is necessarily what we agree with or what we're liking to hear, at the end of the day, it's all about supporting the players and the kids that are donning the proud blue and gold, that are going to be future alums, future ambassadors of this university, because Thriller and I bleed UCLA. We know you all bleed UCLA as well. As always, be loud, be proud, be passionate Bruins. We're going to get off the mat, get to 1-2, and 4 is up forever.